What is up, true believers? It's Mason here with Comics and Crosses, and today I just had to throw together a little quick review of the Ice Cream Man Quarantine Comics Special that just came out last week. A really interesting book, as Ice Cream Man always is, with some interesting themes that I think were worth discussing. So let's get into it. Okay guys, so Ice Cream Man is a unique title, to say the least, from Image Comics. It is a series that is really hot right now. It's an independent that you may not have heard of. It's not your typical superhero series, but it follows along with different one-shots, unique stories, which is kind of fun. It's kind of like watching, I would say, it's like the Twilight Zone or something like that, the Outer Limits, these different kind of unique tales of horror and fantasy, and it's very dark. It's very dark. The series by W. Maxwell Prince, Martin Morazzo, Chris O'Halloran, I think I'm saying that right. But this Quarantine Comic Special actually has a some other guests taking part, because what it was this is a collection of short stories, short comic stories that were released digital originally and now finally into print. So some of us may have already read these, and some may be totally unfamiliar with these. So that is kind of the basic rundown here. I am relatively new to Ice Cream Man comics. I am catching up in back issues right now. I got number 1 up there, and then got several others in the short box right now. So this series, though, the themes that seem to come up in Ice Cream Man, and that definitely come up in these stories, is a sort of I would say hopelessness. There's a kind of depression or dreary outlook on on life and sort of the status quo. It seems like a lot of these stories, in this book included, have to do with sort of the settled upon status quo. I think a lot of people who are writers can kind of relate to the perspective and ideas that come out of this. Kind of looking at the world in a certain almost analytical sort of way. And so I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that came across and stuck out to me here, especially from a Christian perspective. So first thing is, twice in this book you actually see God referenced as a big hand in the sky, basically saying no or stop, or handing things or doing things, pointing. It's a funny kind of way to view God. Obviously it's not a Christian way to view God, as we know from Scripture that no one has seen God. God is beyond our comprehension. He himself is bigger than big, if we can. He's infinite, all-knowing, all-powerful, all the alls. Jesus, however, obviously was God coming in human form so that we could understand him and wrap our minds around him. So this is sort of this take of God in here is not a Jesus take, but more of like a out there in space kind of idea. As I kind of mentioned at the start, there's some criticism of sort of the status quo, the way man and woman have to live together, sort of the dreams that people chase and don't achieve or attain to. There's the second story where we see reference to God is a guy who goes out all the way, he goes past God into the very end of the multiverse, I think they call it, and then decides to go back because where else is there to go? So it kind of has a everything is meaningless, Ecclesiastes type feel to it. If you've never read the book of Ecclesiastes, it's surprisingly deep and philosophical, more so than I think the average person who hasn't read the Bible might think of Bible scriptures to be. But it's a whole reflection at the end of the life of King Solomon, who was considered the wisest man to ever live, where he sits down and thinks about the purpose of toil and work and wealth and fame and pleasure and all the different things that he's experienced in his life, sort of looking for fulfillment. And he keeps coming back to the idea that everything is utterly meaningless, but ultimately we're just to honor God and continue on, and that's the best that we can do. And that's not to say that I'm criticizing the writer or writers for conveying a kind of hopeless state. I think the ability to express or in art create a reflection of a state of being, even if it's negative, is a really beautiful, profound thing. If you can effectively communicate what someone feels, I think therein lies human connection. So there's obviously a human connection to these stories still. So yeah, so I would not criticize. I mean, obviously my perspective differs, and I feel like I couldn't write something without hope because of my faith in God, because of my outlook on life. At the same time, I don't knock it as a wrong or bad thing. I think the art there is really very beautiful. The artwork in here is kind of that consistent to the rest of the series, sort of creepy almost in a way, simplistic in a way, but very effective. The paneling, very effective. What they choose to have you focus on in each moment is very effective. You know, this book kind of made me think of something. I remember in high school having a friend who wrote on his arm, I think it might have been a Marilyn Manson quote, but it was something to the effect of, God is a number that you can never count to. And there was a sort of hopelessness in that expression, or an idea that you can never know God, or it's just, or that it's just some mystery out there. And one thing about the Ice Cream Man, you know, looking at the story of the alcoholic in here, the story of the man traveling to the end of the multiverse, the story of Adam and Eve, it's almost like these talking about big concepts without any sort of resolution or ending. So that could be because the author very much doesn't believe in God. I don't know. I don't know much about him. I would say this, and this is just a personal take that I want to throw out there, my own thoughts and reflections. I think that humankind always has a way of pursuing and seeking out something that's eternal, something that's greater than themselves. If you think about it, we live in a world that has seasons. Everything comes to life and dies. People live and they die. Our day starts and it ends. There's this constant rise and fall, and everything that we do and the whole world around us all kind of speaks of death. And yet, if you think about it, everybody's trying to find something eternal. They're trying to live on. They're trying to have some impact or touch something that's greater than themselves. Now, some would say that this is why people believe in God. This is why people need religion. I actually personally think that it speaks to our Creator. It speaks to the fact that there is something greater going on, and it's very hard to understand, and at times life can seem very hopeless. But actually, there's a verse that I have up in the back of my office studio set here. It's Ecclesiastes 3:11, that book I mentioned earlier that's kind of talks about the meaninglessness of life, that everything is meaningless. But in that book, it also mentions this. The verse is that God makes everything beautiful in its time, and He's written eternity into the hearts of men, yet so they would not know God's beginning from the end. So it's kind of a complicated little phrasing of words, but basically what that's saying is that God is in control. He has a seasonal approach in how He does things, and yet He's put eternity into people's hearts so that we inherently feel and sense a call, a connection to the divine, and yet we can never fully comprehend God and what He's doing, beginning to end. It's just too much for us. I think a lot of times in people's philosophies, in people's outlook on life, and even people's political persuasion, there's always this sense that we want to make things this or that, yes or no. It's only one way. And I would say that sometimes, and a lot of times I find actually with God, it's yes and. It's this and that. And we just want to pick a side, and there's just kind of our limited human understanding that we get that way. And so, but with God, all things are possible. And in that verse that is so significant to me, and it kind of motivates what I'm doing here on the channel, you can see that God has a big plan. We have a sense of him there, and yet can't know what he's doing. But there's still beauty in the middle of all of this. So that's what I would say. That's my perhaps too thorough, in-depth look at the themes behind the Quarantine Comic Special from Ice Cream Man. But with that said, it's a brilliant book. I think this writer is amazing, and I love the art of the way that he expresses states of being and the human experience. I have a different outlook, but I can still really appreciate this book. So if you got a chance to pick it up, then cool. It's quite an experience, and the Ice Cream Man series in general is quite an experience. It may be hard to find, though. It's a hot series, and I know my LCS only orders it for people who have it on Saver. So look into that, ask your local comic shop, and thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, and share this channel. Help me get the word out. And if you believe that there's something special about these stories and that they speak to something special inside of us, then I really appreciate you being a part of this journey and helping me share this content. So talk to you next time.